Hey everybody, welcome to Coffee with Joe for October 15th, 2009. This is Pete Young in Plainfield, Vermont. I'm here with Joe Bongiovanni, Harborton, Virginia. Hey Joe, how you doing today?
Hey, Pete, how you doing, man?
I want to point our viewers and visitors to the video on our website, economicstability.org, of Dennis Kucinich's announcement that he's going to be entering the American Monetary and Financial Security Act into Congress this fall. Joe, 2 weeks ago on the October 1st Coffee with Joe, we talked a little bit about the Fed independence. You were hammering pretty hard on Barney Frank as not defending his constituents' interests. I found
Right.
a quote from Bernanke from the Senate budget hearings this summer. My concern about the legislation is that if the GAO is auditing not only the operational aspects of our programs and the details of our programs, but is making judgments about our policy decisions, that would effectively be a takeover of monetary policy by the Congress, a repudiation of the independence of the Federal Reserve, which would be highly destructive to the stability of the financial system, the dollar, and our national economic situation.
You know, Ben Bernanke, who's the chairman of the Federal Reserve, coming out and threatening the people of the United States to say that if we want to take a look over their shoulder about whether and how the actions of the Federal Reserve banking system, who's been in control of the money of this country for almost 100 years, and how their policies and actions both failed to prevent, that's their job, Pete, both failed to prevent and in fact may have caused this financial crash that has caused the people of the United States of America to already lose trillions of dollars of their own personal wealth, Pete. Okay? When we have the president of the Federal Reserve Bank saying they don't want anybody questioning their monetary policy actions, there can be no more greater height to hubris, Pete, in my opinion. So here we are. We have our own aristocracy, in the bankers. And they don't want the people of the United States looking over their shoulder to see how they're doing, despite the loss of trillions of dollars in real wealth by the people of the United States of America. They're not accountable to us, okay? And they never will be. The only group that we can go to when we see the losses that we see, unemployment, loss of wages, loss of housing, loss of benefit, loss of government services, Pete, when we see all that stuff happening around us, who do we go to? We go to our Congress and we tell them we want them to fix the problem. And the Congress people need to be able to fix the problem. Here we have an economic monetary system problem. Who does the assessment? They bring Bernanke in there. He double speaks them down the tube and tells them, whatever you do, if you don't want the economy to crash, the currency to completely go in the tank, and financial stability to go out the window, whatever you do, don't ask me about the problem. They're taking the position, Pete, that there's no other way. Okay, we can't even talk about there being another way. And when Congressman Kucinich enters his bill, we're going to have a debate about whether there can be another way. When the Chicago Plan economists, and remember, Pete, I want to repeat that, 3 or 4 years after the 29 crash, presented to FDR the plan for monetary reform that called for the end of the private creation and destruction of capital and the establishment of a permanent money system, Pete. They did it out of knowledge of how the money system works. They wrote the books on how the money system works. FDR, for all the great things that he did, he was afraid to take on the banks. And look at how, what it did to him, much later. That is to say, when they got to 37 and they had to, again, contract the money supply, and we pitched over that other edge of the depression that lasted till the war came along, Pete, till we were right into the war. So we can either, have a money system where wars are the answer, or we can have a money system where, people, infrastructure, jobs, employment, wages, the things that matter to real people are what the money system is used for. We can have that, Pete, and we will have it if we can pass Dennis Kucinich's legislation. I want to say the stars are aligned, for having a monetary revolution in this country. We're peaceful, nice, peaceful, by the pen. We wrote the act with the right to revoke it, and we're going to revoke it, and we got to start studying about the exit strategy to get out of it.
I think monetary reformers shoot themselves in the foot when they say things like Fed is no more federal than Federal Express. But that's not true. The President of the United States doesn't appoint the President of Federal Express.
Well, there's two parts of that, Pete. Okay, one part is you're right. You're absolutely right, Pete. The Federal Reserve is established by legislation. We do appoint its chair and its board, actually. When I say we, don't get me wrong. It's not us, we the people. It's the bankers, who nominate and confirm their nominees. So therefore, we are different from Federal Express. But when you take Federal Express is kind of akin to the post office. It's on a slightly larger scale, but it handles letters now. By the way, So what if Federal Express said, you know what? You know that we neoliberals are into privatizing everything. Why don't you just let us take over the post office, and we'll even give you the veto power over who's the chairman of the board of the Federal Express Corporation, Pete. Okay, now does that make them part of the government, or are they still a private corporation? And the answer is appointing the chair or the president of a board doesn't make them part of the government. Every court decision that's been rendered says Federal Reserve banks are private corporations, not under the influence of the government.
To be continued. Thanks, Joe. We'll see you next week.
Hey, thanks, Pete.